She had perfected the art of rushing through life alone, until the worst day of her life taught her that some connections are worth slowing down for. Every morning at exactly 7:47, the same sounds echoed through the narrow hallway of apartment building 42B. Click, click, click went the high heels rushing down the corridor. Then came the familiar jingle of keys, followed by the soft thud of something hitting the floor, and finally, that little sigh of frustration. Maya had this routine down to a science, though it never seemed to work in her favor. She'd wake up, shower quickly, grab her coffee in a travel mug that was always too full, throw her laptop into its worn leather bag, and attempt to juggle everything while locking her door. Something always fell. Always. Across the hall in apartment 42A, Alex had become an accidental expert on Maya's morning schedule. He worked from home, designing websites and logos for small businesses, which meant his mornings were flexible. But for 8 months now, he'd found himself timing his own activities around the daily symphony from across the hall. Alex wasn't trying to be nosy. It just happened naturally. He'd be making his own coffee when he'd hear her alarm go off through the thin walls. 20 minutes later, like clockwork, came the sound of her hair dryer. Then the closet door sliding back and forth as she searched for the right outfit. Finally, the grand finale of her rushing out, dropping something and muttering under her breath. At first, it was just background noise, but over time it became strangely comforting, like having a neighbor who played the same song every morning. Alex found himself actually listening for it, and on the rare occasions when Maya left early or late, his own morning felt somehow incomplete. He'd seen her plenty of times in the elevator or lobby. Maya was the kind of person who always looked put together, even when she was clearly running behind schedule. Dark hair usually pulled back in a neat bun, professional clothes that somehow stayed wrinkle-free despite her chaotic mornings, and this determined look on her face like she was ready to take on the world. Their conversations were always brief and polite. "Morning," she'd say, checking her phone while they waited for the elevator. "Nice weather today," Alex might reply, though they both knew she probably hadn't looked outside yet. Sometimes she'd mention the broken mailbox in the lobby that their landlord kept promising to fix next week. Other times, they'd just share a knowing look about the construction noise from the apartment renovations upstairs. Alex often wondered what Maya did for work that required such early mornings and professional attire. She always carried that laptop bag, so probably something in an office. Marketing maybe, or accounting. She had that efficient, organized energy of someone who dealt with deadlines and meetings all day. What Maya didn't know was that Alex had started timing his own morning activities around her routine, not in a strange way, just practical timing. He'd learned that if he needed to do laundry in the building's shared laundry room, 8 a.m. was perfect because Maya would already be gone, and most other residents were still getting ready. If he needed to check his mailbox right after hearing her leave was ideal, because the lobby would be quiet. This particular Tuesday started differently, though. Alex was watering his small collection of plants by the kitchen window when he realized it was already 8:03 a.m. Maya's routine was usually so precise that he could set his watch by it, but today there were no heel clicks in the hallway. He'd heard her alarm go off at the usual time, around 7:20. The hairdryer had run longer than normal, maybe an extra 10 minutes. The closet door had been opening and closing repeatedly, more than usual. It sounded like she was having one of those mornings where nothing goes right. Everyone has them. Alex continued watering his plants, a small spider plant and 2 succulents that didn't require much care, but added some life to his apartment. He'd named them, though he'd never admit that to anyone. The spider plant was Henry, and the succulents were Thing 1 and Thing 2. They were excellent listeners and never judged his tendency to talk to himself while working on design projects. Finally, at 8:03 he heard Maya's door open, but something was immediately different about the sound. Usually she burst out of her apartment like she was escaping a fire, all quick movements and purposeful energy. Today her footsteps were slower, more careful. Alex found himself pausing with the watering can in his hand, listening more intently than usual. There was something in the rhythm of her movement that felt wrong, like a song being played at the wrong speed. Then came the sound that made him stop completely. Instead of her usual oops and quick scramble to pick up whatever had fallen, there was a series of thuds. Multiple things hitting the floor. Her laptop bag from the sound of it. Something rolling, probably her coffee mug. the distinct sound of papers scattering. But what came next was what made Alex set down his watering can and move toward his front door. Nothing. Complete silence. No frustrated sigh. No hurried gathering of items, no muttered comments about running late. Just absolute quiet in a hallway that should have been filled with Maya's usual controlled chaos. Through his apartment's thin walls, Alex could hear his upstairs neighbor's TV and someone down the hall taking a shower. Normal morning sounds, but the hallway itself had gone completely silent, which felt wrong in a way he couldn't explain. Maya was always moving, always in motion, always rushing toward whatever important thing came next in her day. Standing still wasn't part of her vocabulary, at least not based on 8 months of observation. So what would make someone like Maya stop completely in a hallway, surrounded by her scattered belongings? Alex found himself walking toward his front door without making a conscious decision to do so. His apartment had one of those peepholes that gave a fisheye view of the hallway. Though it distorted everything and only showed a small section of the corridor, he looked through the peephole and felt his stomach drop slightly. Maya was standing in the middle of the hallway, completely motionless. Her belongings were scattered in a wide circle around her feet, like she'd just dropped everything at once. Her laptop bag was open, papers spilling out across the ugly beige carpet. Her travel coffee mug had rolled several feet away, leaving a dark trail of spilled coffee behind it. But it wasn't the mess that concerned Alex. It was Maya herself. Even through the distorted view of the peephole, he could see that something was very wrong. She was standing with her shoulders slightly hunched, staring down at something in her hand. Her face was pale, paler than he'd ever seen it, and there was something about her posture that suggested shock or disbelief. Alex had seen that look before, though not often. It was the expression people get when they receive news that changes everything. The kind of look that comes right before the world shifts on its axis and nothing is ever quite the same again. Standing there at his door, Alex faced a choice that would change both their lives. He could mind his own business, go back to his plants and his work and pretend he hadn't seen anything. Maya was a grown woman who could handle whatever was happening. They were neighbors, not friends. They'd exchanged maybe 50 words total in 8 months. Or he could open his door and step into whatever crisis was unfolding in the hallway. He could become involved in the life of someone he barely knew, simply because she was another human being who looked like she needed help. The hallway remained silent, and Maya remained motionless, and Alex found his hand moving toward the door handle before his brain had fully decided what to do next. Alex's hand stayed frozen on the door handle for what felt like minutes but was probably only seconds. Through the peephole, he could see Maya still standing there, perfectly still like a statue someone had placed in the middle of the hallway. This wasn't normal. Nothing about this was normal. He'd been watching Maya's morning routine for 8 months now, and she was like a machine. Even on her worst days when she was running really late or couldn't find her keys, she never just stopped. She was always moving, always problem-solving, always pushing forward to whatever came next. But now she looked like someone had hit a pause button on her entire life. Alex stepped back from the peephole and ran his hand through his hair. What was he supposed to do here? They weren't friends. They barely knew each other beyond polite elevator conversations and the occasional complaint about the broken mailbox. He didn't even know her last name, though he'd seen it on packages left in the lobby sometimes. Still, something was clearly wrong. Really wrong. He looked through the peephole again. Maya had moved slightly, but only to shift her weight from one foot to the other. She was holding something in her right hand, staring down at it with an expression that made Alex's chest feel tight. It looked like her phone, though from this angle and through the distorted glass he couldn't be sure. The coffee stain on the carpet was getting bigger. That expensive-looking travel mug she carried every morning had rolled all the way to the wall, and dark liquid was slowly spreading across the ugly beige carpet that the landlord refused to replace. Papers from her laptop bag were scattered everywhere, some of them probably getting wet from the spilled coffee. Maya didn't seem to notice any of it. She was completely focused on whatever was on that phone screen, and the look on her face was getting worse, not better. Alex had seen that expression once before, about 3 years ago, when his sister called to tell him their grandmother had passed away. That same frozen shock, like the brain couldn't quite process what it was hearing, like reality had suddenly become too heavy to carry. The hallway felt different now, charged with something Alex couldn't name. It was the same beige walls, the same flickering fluorescent light that made everyone look sick, the same worn carpet that had probably been there since the building opened in the 1980s. But the air itself seemed to have changed, become thicker somehow. Alex realized he was holding his breath. He stepped away from the door and paced to his kitchen window, then back to the door. This was ridiculous. He was overthinking things. Maybe Maya had just gotten an important work email. Maybe she was reading something that required concentration. Maybe she'd realized she forgot something important and was trying to decide whether to go back inside or handle it later. But even as he tried to convince himself of these reasonable explanations, Alex knew they weren't right. The way Maya was standing, the way she'd dropped everything at once, the complete stillness that had taken over someone who was never still, none of that suggested a work email or a forgotten item. He looked through the peephole one more time. Maya had raised her free hand to her mouth, and Alex could see her shoulders shaking slightly. She was crying, or trying not to cry. It was hard to tell through the distorted glass, but there was definitely something happening with her breathing. That decided it. Alex unlocked his door as quietly as possible and opened it just a crack. The hallway smelled like spilled coffee and something else, something sharp and metallic that might have been fear or shock. Maya was about 6 feet away from his door, close enough that he could see her clearly now without the peephole's distortion. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was messy, like she'd been running her hands through it. Her face was pale in a way that made her dark eyes look too big for her face. She was definitely holding her phone, and whatever was on the screen had her complete attention. Alex opened his door a little wider, and it made that familiar creaking sound that everyone in the building had learned to ignore. But Maya didn't react at all. She didn't even glance in his direction. She was completely absorbed in whatever tragedy was playing out on her phone screen. He cleared his throat softly. Nothing. Maya, Alex said quietly, using her name out loud for maybe the second or third time ever. She looked up then, and Alex felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Maya's eyes were wide with shock and filled with tears that hadn't quite started falling yet. But it wasn't just sadness he saw there. It was terror, the kind of deep fear that comes when something you never imagined could happen suddenly becomes real. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Alex in his doorway, still holding the door handle like it might anchor him to something solid. Maya in the middle of the hallway, surrounded by her scattered morning routine, holding her phone like it contained all the worst news in the world. Maya started to say something, then stopped. She looked down at her phone again, then back at Alex, like she was trying to figure out if he was really there or if shock was making her see things. Alex stepped fully into the hallway, leaving his door open behind him. The carpet felt rough under his bare feet. He'd forgotten to put on shoes, but that seemed unimportant now. What mattered was that Maya looked like she might collapse at any second, and there was no one else around to help. What happened? Alex asked, though he wasn't sure she'd be able to answer. She had that look people get when something so big happens that their brain can't quite catch up to it yet. Maya held up her phone with a shaking hand. "My dad," she whispered, and her voice sounded nothing like the confident, professional woman Alex heard every morning in the elevator. There was an accident. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Alex felt his own stomach drop, even though he'd never met Maya's father and knew nothing about her family. But the way she said it, the way her voice broke on the word accident, told him everything he needed to know about how bad this was. Is he? Alex couldn't finish the question. Some questions are too scary to ask completely. "I don't know," Maya said, and now the tears did start falling. "My mom called. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She said there was an accident and I need to come to the hospital right away, and..." Maya's voice got higher with each word until she couldn't talk anymore. Alex looked at the mess around. Maya's feet. Her laptop bag open with papers scattered everywhere. Her coffee mug still dripping onto the carpet. Her keys on the floor next to a lipstick that had rolled under the hallway table. All the pieces of her carefully organized morning routine, now spread across the hallway like evidence of how quickly everything can fall apart. "Come inside," Alex heard himself say. It wasn't really a decision, more like an instinct. "You shouldn't be standing out here." Maya nodded without really seeming to hear him. She was looking at her phone again, probably reading the same text message over and over, trying to make the words say something different than what they actually said. Alex quickly gathered her belongings, shoving papers back into her laptop bag and picking up her keys and the lipstick. The coffee mug was empty now, having spilled everything onto the carpet. He'd worry about cleaning that up later. "Maya," he said gently, touching her elbow. "Come on, let's go inside." She let him guide her toward his apartment, moving like someone walking through deep water. Just before they reached his doorway, Maya stopped and looked back at the coffee stain spreading across the hallway carpet. "I made a mess," she said, like this was the most important thing in the world right now. "It doesn't matter," Alex told her, and he meant it. "Nothing else matters right now except getting you somewhere safe so you can figure out what you need to do next." Maya nodded again and followed him inside, and Alex realized that whatever happened next, this was the moment when two strangers became something more than just neighbors who shared polite conversations in an elevator. Alex's apartment felt different with Maya inside it. He'd lived there for 2 years, and it was his space, arranged exactly how he liked it. The couch positioned perfectly for watching TV, his work desk by the window where the light was best for design projects, his coffee table stacked with magazines, and the remote controls he could never keep organized. But now, with Maya standing in his living room looking lost and scared, everything seemed smaller and more intimate. Maya hadn't moved from the spot near his front door where she'd stopped walking. She was still holding her phone in both hands now, staring at the screen like it might change if she looked hard enough. Alex could see her reflection in the black screen, her face pale and distorted in the dark glass. "Sit down," Alex said gently, gesturing toward his couch. It was brown leather, comfortable but not fancy, the kind of furniture that came from browsing weekend sales until you found something that worked. "You look like you might fall over." Maya didn't seem to hear him. She was reading something on her phone again, her lips moving slightly as she went through whatever message had turned her morning upside down. Alex watched her face change as she read, seeing new waves of worry wash over her features. "Maya," he said a little louder. She looked up at him then, really looked at him, like she was seeing him for the first time. Her eyes were red from crying, but the tears had stopped for now. There was something else in her expression, though, something that made Alex's chest feel tight. It was the look of someone who had just realized their world was completely different than it had been an hour ago. "I'm sorry," Maya said suddenly. "I shouldn't be here. I don't even know you." "Not really. I mean, we live across the hall from each other, but we've never actually talked about anything important, and now I'm in your apartment crying about my personal problems, and you probably have work to do." And she was talking faster and faster, the words tumbling over each other like they were trying to escape. Alex recognized this kind of talking. His sister did it when she was really stressed, just kept talking to fill the silence because quiet felt too scary. "Maya," Alex interrupted gently. "Breathe." She stopped talking and took a shaky breath. Then another one. Alex could see her trying to pull herself together, trying to become the put-together professional woman he saw every morning. But it wasn't working. The shock was too fresh, too big. "Tell me what happened," Alex said. He moved to his kitchen, which was really just part of the same room separated by a counter. "Start from the beginning." While Maya tried to organize her thoughts, Alex filled his electric kettle and plugged it in. Tea seemed like the right thing to make. He didn't know why, but tea felt more comforting than coffee right now. Coffee was what Maya had been carrying when her world fell apart. Tea was something different, something that belonged to taking care of people. "My mom called," Maya started, then stopped. She was still standing by the door, holding her phone like it might ring again any second. She was crying so hard I could barely understand what she was saying. Alex opened his cabinet and looked through his collection of tea boxes. He had way too many kinds of tea for someone who mostly drank coffee, but he liked having options. Chamomile seemed too relaxing. Green tea had caffeine but might make her more anxious. He settled on something called Honey Lemon Comfort that his sister had given him last Christmas. "What did she say exactly?" Alex asked, unwrapping 2 tea bags. Maya finally moved away from the door, but only to pace back and forth in front of Alex's couch. 3 steps one way, turn around, 3 steps back. Her heels clicked against his hardwood floor, a sound that should have been familiar from hearing it in the hallway every morning, but somehow sounded different in his apartment. She said there was an accident. A car accident. Maya's voice was steadier now, but Alex could hear the effort it was taking. "Dad was driving to work this morning like he does every day. Same route, same time. He's been taking the same road for 15 years, Alex. 15 years. The kettle started making that quiet rumbling sound it made when the water was getting hot. Alex got 2 mugs from his cabinet, plain blue ones that had come as a set. He'd bought them when he first moved in, thinking he'd have people over for coffee or dinner parties. That hadn't happened much, but at least now they were useful. Where does he work? Alex asked, mostly to keep Maya talking. Sometimes talking helped process shock, made it feel more manageable. He teaches high school, history and social studies. He coaches the soccer team too, even though the school doesn't pay him extra for it. Maya had stopped pacing and was looking out Alex's living room window. He loves those kids. Some of them don't have great home situations, you know? Dad always stays late if they need help with homework or just want someone to talk to. Alex could hear the pride in Maya's voice when she talked about her father, even through the fear. It made the situation feel more real somehow, knowing that the person in the hospital wasn't just Maya's dad, but someone who meant something to a bunch of teenagers too. He sounds like a good teacher, Alex said, the best. Maya turned away from the window and looked at Alex directly. He's the reason I went into marketing. Not because he pushed me toward it, but because he taught me that you can make a difference in people's lives if you find work that matters to you. The kettle clicked off, and Alex poured hot water over the tea bags. The smell of honey and lemon filled his small kitchen, warm and comforting. He handed 1 mug to Maya, and she wrapped both hands around it like she was trying to absorb the heat. What else did your mom say? Alex asked gently. Maya took a sip of tea, made a face like she'd forgotten how hot it would be, then tried again more carefully. The other driver ran a red light, hit Dad's car on the driver's side. The paramedics had to cut him out of the car. She said this last part very quietly, like saying it too loud might make it more real than it already was. Alex felt his stomach drop. He'd never been in a serious car accident, but he'd seen enough news stories to know that needing to be cut out of a car was never good news. Is he conscious? Alex asked. I don't know. Maya set her mug down on Alex's coffee table next to a stack of design magazines and yesterday's mail. Mom was too upset to give me details. She just kept saying I needed to come to the hospital right away. She said the doctors are doing tests and they'll know more soon, but she wanted me there. Alex nodded. If someone he loved was in the hospital, he'd want his family there too, even if there wasn't anything they could do to help. Which hospital? He asked. St. Mary's in Portland. It's about 3 hours from here if traffic isn't bad. Maya picked up her phone and looked at it again. I should call my boss. I need to tell him I won't be in today. Or maybe not just today. I don't know how long. Her voice trailed off as she realized she had no idea what came next. How long do you stay at a hospital when someone you love is hurt? How do you make plans when you don't know if those plans will matter? Don't worry about work right now, Alex said. That can wait. Maya looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. It was grateful but also surprised, like she wasn't used to people telling her not to worry about work. Alex wondered what kind of job she had that made her think about calling her boss when her father was in the hospital. I should drive up there, Maya said, more to herself than to Alex. I should leave right now. Alex looked at her carefully. Maya's hands were still shaking slightly when she lifted her tea mug. Her face was pale, and she had that slightly unfocused look people get when they're in shock. The idea of her driving 3 hours in this condition made him feel sick. Maya, he said carefully, I don't think you should drive right now. She looked at him sharply. What do you mean? Of course I have to drive. How else am I supposed to get there? I mean, you're in shock. Your hands are shaking. You're not in any condition to drive 3 hours on the highway. Alex set down his own mug and faced her completely. It's not safe. Not for you or anyone else on the road. Maya opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She looked down at her hands holding the tea mug and seemed surprised to see that Alex was right about the shaking. But I have to get there, she said, and her voice sounded very small. My mom needs me. My dad. She couldn't finish the sentence. Alex made a decision that surprised him as much as it probably surprised Maya. I'll drive you, he said. The words hung in the air between them like something solid. I'll drive you. Alex couldn't believe he'd just said that. 3 days ago, the most personal conversation he'd had with Maya was about whether the elevator was making a weird noise. Now he was offering to drive her 3 hours to a hospital to see her father, who might be dying. Maya stared at him for a long moment, her tea mug halfway to her lips. You don't have to do that, she said finally. I barely know you. We've never even had a real conversation before today. That doesn't matter, Alex said, and he was surprised to realize he meant it completely. You shouldn't be alone right now, and you definitely shouldn't be driving. Maya set her mug down and looked around Alex's apartment like she was seeing it for the first time. Her eyes took in his work desk covered with design sketches, the bookshelf full of graphic novels and photography books, the small collection of plants by the window that he talked to when he was working on difficult projects. This is weird, Maya said suddenly. I mean, really weird. This morning I was rushing to catch the 8:15 bus so I wouldn't be late for my presentation at work. I was worried about whether I'd remembered to print enough copies of my report. That was my biggest problem an hour ago. Alex nodded. He'd had moments like that, where you realize how quickly everything can change. One phone call, one piece of bad news, and suddenly all the things you thought were important don't matter anymore. Now my dad might be... Maya couldn't finish the sentence. She picked up her phone and looked at it again, then put it down quickly like it had burned her. I keep checking to see if my mom called again with more news, but I'm also terrified that she will call because what if the news is worse? Alex understood that feeling. Sometimes not knowing felt safer than knowing, even when the not knowing was making you crazy. Let me ask you something, Alex said, moving to sit on the edge of his coffee table so he was facing Maya directly. If this was my dad in the hospital and I was sitting in your apartment falling apart, what would you do? Maya thought about that for a moment. I'd probably offer to drive you to the hospital, she admitted. Exactly. So stop overthinking this and let me help you. Alex got up and went to his bedroom to grab a sweatshirt and his car keys. His apartment was small enough that he could still hear Maya in the living room, talking quietly to someone on the phone. Probably calling her work to explain why she wouldn't be in today. Hi Janet, it's Maya, he heard her say. I need to take an emergency personal day. My father was in a car accident and I need to get to the hospital in Portland. There was a pause. No, I don't know how long I'll be out. I'll call you when I know more. When Alex came back to the living room, Maya was putting her phone in her purse with shaking hands. My boss wants me to email her the presentation file so someone else can handle the meeting today, she said. Like that's the most important thing right now. Some people don't know how to react when real life happens, Alex said. They fall back on work stuff because it feels more manageable than dealing with actual emergencies. Maya looked at him with surprise, like she hadn't expected him to understand workplace dynamics. Alex realized that even though they'd been neighbors for 8 months, Maya probably had no idea what he did for work or anything else about his life. I work from home, Alex explained, answering her unasked question. Freelance graphic design, which means I can leave whenever I want without asking anyone's permission. That sounds nice, Maya said wistfully. I work for a marketing firm downtown. Lots of meetings, lots of deadlines, lots of presentations that seem incredibly important until something like this happens. Alex grabbed his wallet and checked that he had his driver's license. Do you need to pack anything? Change of clothes, toothbrush, that kind of thing? Maya looked down at herself. She was wearing a dark blue dress with a blazer. Professional but not particularly comfortable for spending hours in a hospital waiting room. I should probably change clothes and grab some things just in case. Just in case what? Alex asked gently. Just in case I need to stay longer than one day, Maya said quietly. In case Dad needs surgery or... She stopped talking and took a deep breath. I'm trying not to think about worst-case scenarios, but my brain keeps going there anyway. That's normal, Alex told her. When someone you love is hurt, your brain tries to prepare you for every possibility, even the scary ones. Maya nodded and stood up from the couch. Give me 10 minutes to change and pack a bag? Take as long as you need, Alex said. I'll wait right here. Maya paused at his front door. Alex, why are you doing this, really? We don't know each other well enough for you to drop everything and drive me 3 hours to a hospital. Alex thought about that question. Why was he doing this? Because Maya looked like she might collapse if someone didn't help her? Because the idea of her driving in shock made him nervous? Because he'd been listening to her morning routine for 8 months and felt like he knew her better than he actually did? Because it's the right thing to do, he said finally. And because if something happened to someone I loved, I'd want a neighbor to care enough to help. Maya's eyes filled with tears again, but she smiled for the first time since she'd gotten the phone call. Thank you, she said simply. After Maya left to pack, Alex looked around his apartment and tried to figure out what he needed to bring for a road trip he hadn't planned. He grabbed his phone charger, a bottle of water, and some granola bars from his kitchen cabinet. Then he remembered that Maya probably hadn't eaten anything this morning, given how her routine had been interrupted. He made 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and wrapped them in aluminum foil. It felt silly, like he was packing lunch for a school field trip. But hospitals were expensive, and Maya might not think about eating once they got there. While he was putting the sandwiches in a small bag, Alex realized what he was really doing. He was taking care of someone, not just helping a neighbor with a practical problem, but actually taking care of another person who needed help. It had been a long time since anyone had needed him like that. Alex had moved to this apartment building because he liked living alone, liked having his own space and his own routine. He worked alone, ate alone, spent most evenings alone working on design projects or reading. It was peaceful and uncomplicated. No one else's problems to worry about, no one else's schedule to consider. But standing in his kitchen, packing snacks for a woman whose father might be dying, Alex realized that maybe peaceful and uncomplicated wasn't everything he wanted from life. Maya knocked on his door exactly 10 minutes later. She'd changed into jeans and a soft gray sweater, and she was carrying a small overnight bag that looked like it had been packed in a hurry. "Ready?" Alex asked. Maya nodded, then shook her head, then nodded again. "I don't think anyone's ever ready for this kind of thing, but I'm as ready as I can be." They walked down to the parking garage together, and Alex was struck by how different this felt from their usual polite encounters in the elevator. There was an intimacy to shared crisis, a way that emergency situations stripped away all the normal social barriers between people. Alex's car was a blue Honda that was reliable but not impressive. As they got in, Maya immediately pulled out her phone to check for messages from her mother. "Nothing new," she said, buckling her seatbelt. "I don't know if that's good news or bad news. Maybe it just means the doctors are still figuring things out," Alex suggested as he backed out of his parking space. "Medical stuff takes time." As they drove out of the garage and onto the street, Alex caught a glimpse of their apartment building in his rearview mirror. This morning, he'd been a guy who worked from home and talked to his plants and lived a quiet, predictable life. Now he was driving a near stranger to the hospital where her father might be fighting for his life. It was strange how quickly everything could change. One phone call, one moment of crisis, and suddenly, 2 people who barely knew each other were connected in a way that felt deeper and more real than months of polite conversation ever could. The first hour of the drive passed mostly in silence. Maya stared out the passenger window, watching familiar neighborhoods turn into suburbs, then into farmland and forests. Alex kept glancing over at her, checking to make sure she was okay, but also giving her space to process whatever she was thinking about. The radio was playing soft music, nothing too cheerful or too sad. Alex had turned the volume down low so it wouldn't disturb Maya if she wanted to make phone calls or just think quietly. Every few minutes she'd check her phone, hoping for an update from her mother, but the screen stayed dark. "Tell me about your dad," Alex said finally, when the silence started feeling too heavy. "What's he like?" Maya turned away from the window and looked at Alex. For a moment he thought she might not answer, might prefer to stay lost in her own worried thoughts. But then she smiled slightly, the first real smile he'd seen from her all day. "He's the kind of person who remembers everyone's birthday," Maya said. "Not just family birthdays, but his students, the other teachers at school, even the custodian and the lunch ladies. He keeps a calendar with everyone's important dates written in it." Alex smiled. "That's really nice. He says everyone deserves to feel special on their birthday, especially kids who might not get that at home." Maya's voice got stronger as she talked about her father. "Some of his students don't have great family situations, you know, so Dad makes sure they know at least one adult cares about them." "How long has he been teaching?" Alex asked. 22 years. He started when he was 25, right out of graduate school. Mom says he was so nervous on his first day that he threw up in the school parking lot before walking into the building." Maya laughed, a real laugh that made the car feel less heavy. Now he's the teacher that new staff members go to when they need advice about handling difficult classes or dealing with stressed-out parents. Alex could picture Maya's father clearly now. The kind of teacher who stayed after school to help struggling students, who kept granola bars in his desk for kids who forgot lunch money, who probably knew more about his students' lives than some of their own parents did. "He sounds like an amazing teacher," Alex said. "He really is. Every year at graduation, kids come up to thank him for believing in them when they didn't believe in themselves. Dad always cries during graduation speeches. Every single year. Mom teases him about it, but I think it's sweet." Maya was quiet for a moment, and Alex could see her trying not to think about whether her father would be able to attend any more graduations. "What about the soccer coaching?" Alex asked, trying to keep her talking about positive memories. "Oh, that's his favorite part," Maya said, her face lighting up again. "He never played soccer seriously himself, but he learned everything he could about it because he wanted to give the kids a good program. He spends his own money on equipment sometimes when the school budget doesn't cover everything the team needs." Alex shook his head in amazement. "Your dad sounds like the kind of person who makes the world better just by being in it." "He really is," Maya agreed. "That's why this is so scary. The world needs more people like my dad, not fewer." They drove past a sign that said Portland, 127 miles. Still more than 2 hours to go. Alex's car was comfortable enough for long drives, but he could see Maya getting more anxious as they got closer to their destination. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said suddenly. "Of course. Why did you really offer to drive me today? I mean, I'm grateful, but it's such a big thing to do for someone you barely know." Alex thought about that question, the same one Maya had asked earlier, but with more time to consider his answer. "I guess I've been thinking about that too," he said. "Part of it is that you looked like you needed help, and I was the only one around to offer it." "But that's not the whole reason," Maya said. "It wasn't a question." "No, it's not." Alex merged into the left lane to pass a slow-moving truck. "I think I've been living a pretty small life for the past couple of years. Work, home, not much else. When I saw you in that hallway falling apart, it was the first time in a long time that someone actually needed me for something important." Maya was quiet, listening. "I mean, my clients need me to design their websites and logos, but that's not the same thing. That's business. This is..." Alex searched for the right word. "This is human." "I understand that," Maya said softly. "I think I've been living a pretty small life too. Work takes up so much time and energy that I don't have much left over for anything else. I barely know my neighbors. I don't have time for hobbies. I can't even remember the last time I just sat somewhere and had a real conversation with someone." Alex realized that despite living across the hall from each other for 8 months, this was the longest conversation he and Maya had ever had, and it was happening because of the worst day of her life. "It's weird how it takes something terrible to make you realize you want more connection with people," Alex said. "Maybe terrible things happen to remind us what's actually important," Maya suggested. "Like this morning I was stressed about a work presentation. Now I can't even remember what the presentation was about because the only thing that matters is whether my dad is going to be okay." Alex's phone, which was sitting in the cup holder between them, started buzzing. Maya jumped at the sound, immediately thinking it might be news about her father, but then realized it was Alex's phone, not hers. "Sorry," Alex said, glancing at the screen. "It's just my sister. She can wait." "You can answer it if you want," Maya said. "I don't mind." Alex shook his head. "She's probably just calling to complain about her job or ask if I want to come to dinner this weekend." "Nothing that can't wait until later." "You're close with your sister?" Maya asked. "Pretty close. She lives about an hour away with her husband and their baby." "I don't see them as much as I should, but we talk regularly." Alex paused. "What about you? Do you have siblings?" "Just me. Dad always says I was such a perfect kid that they didn't want to risk messing up their perfect record by having another one." Maya smiled at the memory. "He's joking, of course. I was definitely not a perfect kid. What kind of trouble did you get into?" "Nothing too serious. I was the kid who always asked too many questions, wanted to know why everything worked the way it did. Dad loved it because he's a teacher, but Mom used to get exhausted by all my questions." Maya's voice got softer. "Dad never got tired of explaining things to me. Even when I asked the same question 50 times because I didn't understand the answer." Alex could imagine a young Maya, curious and determined, wearing out everyone around her except for her patient father, who was happy to explain the world to his daughter as many times as she needed. They passed another sign. "Portland, 73 miles. Getting closer now." Maya's phone finally rang. She grabbed it so quickly she almost dropped it, and Alex could see her hand shaking as she answered. "Mom?" Maya's voice was tight with anxiety. "How is he?" Alex couldn't hear what Maya's mother was saying, but he watched Maya's face carefully, trying to read whether the news was good or bad. Maya's expression went from terrified to confused to something that might have been relief. "He's awake," Maya said, and Alex felt his own shoulders relax. "He's really awake and talking?" Maya listened for another minute, asking questions Alex couldn't quite hear. Finally, she hung up and turned to him with tears in her eyes, but this time they looked like happy tears. "Dad's awake," she said. "He has a concussion and some broken ribs, and they want to keep him for observation. But he's awake and talking and asking for ice cream." Alex grinned. "Ice cream? It's this thing he does when he's hurt or sick. He always asks for ice cream like it's going to magically make everything better. When I was little and got hurt, he'd take me for ice cream and tell me it had special healing powers." "Maybe it does," Alex said. Maya laughed, a real laugh full of relief and joy. Maybe it does. They drove the rest of the way to Portland, talking about everything and nothing. Maya told Alex stories about growing up with her father, and Alex shared memories of his own family. By the time they reached the hospital, Alex felt like he knew Maya better than some people he'd been friends with for years. As they pulled into the hospital parking lot, Maya turned to Alex with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I don't know how to thank you for this," she said. "You dropped everything to help someone you barely knew, and I'll never forget that." "You don't need to thank me," Alex said. "I'm just glad your dad is okay." Maya unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't get out of the car immediately. "Would you like to meet him? I mean, if you want to. You don't have to, but I think he'd like to meet the person who made sure I got here safely." Alex thought about that. Meeting Maya's father felt like crossing another line, moving from helpful neighbor to something more like friend. But after spending 3 hours in the car together, after sharing stories and worries and relief, it felt like a line they'd already crossed anyway. "I'd like that," Alex said. As they walked toward the hospital entrance together, Alex realized that this morning he'd been a person who lived alone and liked it that way. Now he was someone who'd driven 3 hours to help a neighbor, someone who'd been invited to meet her family, someone who'd discovered that connection with other people might be worth the risk of having his quiet life disrupted. Sometimes the most important changes in your life